Hello summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides video. My name is Nathan Ng and today we'll be talking about 11 of the most buffed and nerfed champions of Season 11. Whether it's due to the new item system, meta shifts, or direct changes to the champions themselves, these are the champions that have seen the biggest changes of power as we transition from Season 10 to Season 11. We'll start things off with the champions that we think have been the most buffed. Our first pick for the list is VIKTOR. Before the end of Season 10, VIKTOR was in a pretty poor spot. Yeah, if he made it to 6 items, he was a strong carry, but the road there was quite bumpy, and his hex core made it so he basically had one less item slot for situational purchases. Oftentimes, this meant having to choose between the safety of Zhonya's Hourglass and the huge damage spike that Rabadon's would give you. Compare this to the other hard-scaling AP champs of mid lane, and there was just no real reason to be picking VIKTOR. But that all changed in the preseason. Along with the new item system, Riot decided to take away the anchor that was the hex core, and instead built his upgrades into his passive via the hex fragments he gets from farming up. This stacks up with a counter similar to Gangplank's Silver Serpents, giving VIKTOR actually meaningful item choices, starting off with his first item, instead of just being forced to dump 3,000 gold into an item that doesn't even provide cooldown reduction. Now he can either go Liandry's or Luden's and Lichbane as his first 2 items, and he'll spike harder and faster, having a much more reliable power curve. As we see with this first entry, the new item system has caused major shifts to the state of the game. And that brings us to our question of the day. How do you feel about all the changes that we received so far in Season 11? Let us know which parts you like and what should be reverted in the comments down below. We would really love to hear what you have to say on these things. VIKTOR wasn't the only champ to get a freed up item slot. In fact, with completed jungle items being removed, every champion in the role is now able to hit their 1 item power spike. And no champion has benefited from this change more than Hecarim. Hecarim spiked so hard on his first item that even with the previous system, he would simply just finish Red Smite and build into Trinity Force. Then he would go back to finish Cinderhulk 3 or 4 items deep into his build. With this new change, he quite literally tramples his enemies. While Hecarim was a pretty strong pick before the preseason, one major weakness that he had was how long it actually took him to reach his Trinity Force power spike. While other junglers would spike around the 25 or 2600 gold mark with the Warrior, Runic Echoes, Bloodrazor, and Cinderhulk, Hecarim had to farm up to 3700 gold for his item. Now, with those default items gone, Hecarim reaches his power spike just about as fast as anyone else, quite literally cutting down on the risk of the enemy jungler being able to use the earlier spike to snowball a lead before Hecarim is able to carry. With a more consistent early game, Hecarim is pretty much the best jungler in the game, and now you can choose to build into Trinity for damage against squishier targets, or opt into Divine Sunderer for more extended fights against tankier foes. As I said before, this champion creeps me out. He is 90% legs, and that's weird, man. IVERN is here for pretty much the exact same reason as Hecarim, but where Hecarim would be at least able to finish his jungle item later into this build, all of these were so bad on IVERN that you pretty much just sit on Talisman until you sell it for the 6th item. With the old items, IVERN's first spike wasn't nearly as impressive as Hecarim's Trinity Force, instead he was just building like an enchanter, rushing Athens. While this did help keep her teammates alive, it didn't feel like a meaningful spike like most other junglers had. Building support is great for team fights, but it can feel super weak when fighting in those early game skirmishes. Imagine Lee Sin with a fully completed warrior and IVERN with Athens. All that damage is easily going to overpower the little bit of healing that IVERN's item brings. But now with the new items, that's completely changed. Imperial Mandate synergizes perfectly with IVERN, proccing all of the CC that his kit brings him and his allies with some offensive power for the early game, while still allowing him to build into healing and shielding items to keep everyone buffed and alive. Another new item that synergizes notably well with IVERN is Staff of Flowing Water. While going on the offensive, that extra movement speed it grants him and his ally can make it easier to stick to the target and land his shield slow. Playing IVERN gives you all sort of control as a jungler, while also being as easy as an enchanter like Janna. Almost as easy as hitting that sub button, by the way, so you can go ahead and stay up to date with all of our latest content. Whether you like keeping up with the meta so you know what to pick in ranked, or just watching our top lists like this one. With his VGU, Pantheon was supposed to be more of a god of war than ever before, and while he definitely became a more popular pick, it wasn't in the way that Riot wanted. Champions being played in other roles than they were intended to is actually something Riot encourages, but in this case, his ability to be played as a support actually completely outshone the alternative of him being played as a carry in either a solo lane or the jungle. With his mini rework on patch 10.25, Pantheon has finally broke away from support. And he's not just viable as a solo laner now, he's the highest performing champ in both the top and mid lane, thanks to his ability to use both Gore Drinker and Eclipse to deal with the matchups in the respective roles. Before these changes, Pantheon was basically forced to snowball with the lethality build to win or risk falling off. Now he's able to do well early, but also scales nicely into the mid and late stages of the game. So he comes with early CC, high damage, and doesn't have a weak stage in the game. With only tiny changes to his regeneration on 11.1, he's said to be arguably the best champion in the game with the start of the preseason. If you want to be ready to carry by making the most of this OP pick, be sure to visit us at ProGuides.com. Our top tier coaches would love to help you learn to abuse the OP picks like Pantheon, or any champion that you feel like you want to master. We feel like Pantheon is quite easy to pick up on your own, so if you need help, we're here for you. Before the start of the preseason, we actually had Gragas pinned as one of the worst champions to play in the jungle. His win rate and performance was statistically at the very bottom of the barrel. But with the new items and seemingly small buffs on patch 10.25, he's actually back in the meta. He by no means is the best pick in the jungle right now, but he's still a strong pick and can be flexed into every role but ADC. In fact, he's actually pretty OP as a mid laner in the higher elos, boasting a win rate of just over 55% in Diamond Plus. Considering he wasn't even viable before, that may make him the most buffed champions on the list. Alright, this next one I feel like you guys guessed it, but it's ANIVIA. After the item changes, mages that previously relied on the Terror Goddess were hit hard. With the new Seraphs no longer granting shield or CDR of the previous version, Kassadin and ANIVIA were down in the dumps. While Kassadin is a little bit too volatile of a champion to throw buffs onto, Riot felt like it was appropriate to give ANIVIA some love. And by some love, I mean they gave her more love than I ever experienced in my last relationship. There were some huge buffs. Like our previous pick, she went from the near bottom of the champion pool straight to the top, becoming a top 3 pick. With her relatively simple kit, her win rate being so high means she's a champion that pretty much anyone can pick and get the hang of. So, what made her so strong all of a sudden? When looking at the buffs that she got, the biggest was to her ultimate. While her ultimate meant ANIVIA was always going to be an S tier champion in the wave clear department, when dealing with the highest mobility champions in Modern League, even ANIVIA's relatively low ult cooldown of 6 seconds meant it was too long for her to readjust her zone control in a team fight. With that being lowered to just a single second at max rank, she can freely move around and just follow the fight as she needs, whether it be to drop it directly onto the enemies or just prevent them from entering the arena altogether. Not a fun champion to go against. Before we go into the most nerf champions, do you think that we missed any of the ones that got buffed? If you did, let us know down in the comments. I'll be personally reading them. The first champ we'll be looking at the side of the fence is Zed. For a huge chunk of Season 10, Zed reigned as one of the best mids in the game. He was extremely lane dominant, and he could easily carry with just a lead in the mid game. With preseason's launch, he continued to be OP, but all 80 assassins were, due to how insanely overtuned the items were. As soon as those items took hits, Zed plummeted, dropping down into the bottom of B or even the C tier. Now I'm not saying you can't play Zed, because if you're really good with this champion, he can still wreak havoc, but not a lot of people are as good as you. With tanks and bruisers being so strong right now, and burst damage items taking a big hit to their upfront damage on patch 11.1, Zed's going to be even weaker once a new season officially starts. If you want to play assassins, stick to AP options like Fizz or Echo until Zed sees some serious buffs. Going into the preseason, ADCs for the most part struggled. The only good ones were the aggro ones, namely Jhin and Samira, which meant enchanters were indirectly weak, since they lacked the synergy that engaged supports like Leona and Maokai had with their stronger early game ADCs in lane. But with things balancing out as we got closer to the end of the season, enchanters have started to do pretty well, with one exception. Everyone's favorite unicorn, or I guess least favorite unicorn, Soraka, hasn't adapted as well as the other enchanters. One major reason is how much more accessible Grievous Wound is, with pretty much every champion in the game being able to build it now. Not only is it more accessible, but it can also be applied at a stronger effectiveness at 60%. With healing reduction being both more common and more intense, Soraka's basically not as potent. Sure, her sustain in a poke war around Baron or when she's sieging against a team with no engage can be nice, but most games are decided by fights with decisive engages and quick bursts of damage. And with all of Soraka's power invested in her heals, she just can't do anything else except for keeping her teammates alive, and even that's a little bit more difficult. There's no sign of Grievous Wounds being nerfed anytime soon, so Soraka will need some major power shifts in her kit to put her back in a good spot. Actually, I don't even think that they should change the Grievous Wounds of anything, because have you seen those bruisers now? They're kind of nuts. Anyway, maybe they can make it so her ultimate ignores Grievous Wounds? I don't know. Either way, don't bother playing her until she sees some serious changes. Just like we mentioned with Zed, FIORA dominated almost all of last season. I'd even go as far as to say that she was the second best top laner overall for the second half of the year. With the new items hit, FIORA found success with the new overpowered Ravenous Hydra combined with Gore Drinker. But just like Soraka, FIORA largely depends on her healing, via both items and her kit, to be successful. But also like Soraka, this means that FIORA is pretty easy to counter with easily accessible debuffs. She's still a strong duelist in the side lane, but teamfighting is nearly impossible, as even if you manage to proc her ultimate, the healing is massively reduced and you're easily killed through it. Trust me, I tried picking her in ARAM and it was not fun at all, which is basically just teamfight simulator. While we're on the topic of grievous wounds indirectly gutting champions, we have one last entry to throw out there with Vladimir. This guy quite literally sucks right now because, you know, he's a vampire. Whether you were going top or mid, picking Vladimir in Season 10 pretty much always meant guaranteeing that the other team would have lane priority, and that your jungler would be getting a short end of the stick if he was contested at Scuttlecrab. But given enough time to farm up, you'd scale up and become the teamfight monster, dealing tons of damage and healing up any that you took. Vladimir synergizes actually pretty well with tons of the new items. Rocket Belt and Night Harvester are both really great mythics, and Cosmic Drive is everything that you want on a legendary item. But with his kit being completely reliant on his ability to heal up as he drains his enemies, 60% healing reduction means that without him hitting a massive 5-man ultimate, burning him down in a teamfight is pretty easy. Yeah, he still does some pretty good damage late game, but not without having to kill him several times over due to his crazy healing. He's just completely outshone by so many other hyperscaling champs. And to round out the list, we have Senna. Going into the preseason, Senna dipped in power, dropping from an A tier or even an S tier pick as an ADC down to a B tier. But she was able to skirt by due to how OP lethality mythics were. But those items have since been nerfed, and Senna's been affected pretty badly, to the point that we think that she's a C tier pick at best. As a support, I'd say she's maybe even lower. While in theory, some of the new items, namely the Collector, sounds really good for Senna, the fast-paced, high-damage games just make it really difficult for her to scale up and reach enough passive stacks to have a huge effect on the game. The only way I see Senna becoming a strong pick again is with some direct buffs to the speed of her passive stacks or just really beefing up the rest of her kit. But with how dominant she's been in pro play since her release, I expect Riot to be pretty cautious about giving her any love. And that about wraps up things for our 11 most buffed and nerfed champions of Season 11. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Remember to let us know what you loved and disliked about the changes in the preseason in the comments section down below. We'd love to have you as part of the community. I can't wait to see you all back in the next video, but until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.